Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for that generous introduction, and thank you to the Asia Society for inviting me to speak with all of you today. So we really feel, and I hope you feel too, that this is a time of true growth and renewal in New York City, powered no doubt by the diverse and resilient AAPI communities across the 5 boroughs. However, we also know that it has been a time of great struggle as well for our AAPI neighbors, driven by COVID losses and the unacceptable torrent of violence against Asian people. But as Chris mentioned, we have to be steadfast, we have to be resolute in addressing these challenges. Now, I've had the opportunity to share some of my perspectives in a few different spaces during AAPI Heritage Month and reflect not only on my own journey as a proud Filipino American, but of the journey of the AAPI community here in the city. And there's really one thing that keeps coming to mind that I wanted to speak with all of you about this morning, and that's the concept of inheritance. What we acquire from those who came before us, and what we bequeath to those who will come after. And it's resonant for me in 3 important ways. First, I think about what we inherited as a city government more than a year ago. We inherited difficult conditions, high unemployment, small businesses at the brink of collapse, labor shortages across key sectors. But we were also the beneficiary of incredible strengths here in this city: a resilient workforce, global standing as a hub of commerce and culture, sectors across the city that were ready to partner with government, and a diverse citizenry, including a vibrant and very fast-growing AAPI community, which of course represents, I think, the very best of this city and this country. And it was really that great inheritance that propelled our work forward in this administration. We've been operating nonstop to accelerate the recovery, to jumpstart small businesses, connect New Yorkers to family-sustaining jobs, and to ensure that our diverse neighborhoods were truly flourishing. And our goal in some ways has been very simple. That's to drive an economic recovery that will make our city more equitable, more prosperous, and more resilient. But because this pandemic and its economic fallout have dramatically exposed how the status quo was just not working for far too many in the city, we know that we couldn't afford to simply get back to the way things were. In other words, our response as a city couldn't just be one of chasing a return to normal. Because while our economy has roared back, the jobs we lost during the pandemic have essentially been fully recovered. Tourism, consumer spending are near pre-pandemic levels. New business starts, our labor force participation rates, they've exceeded pre-pandemic levels. We all know that we have more work to do. More work to do for all New Yorkers and for our AAPI neighbors, because all of the positive indicators that I just mentioned, they also mask some pretty harsh realities. Realities like the fact that unemployment for young Asian workers are some of the highest in this city. Realities like the fact that Asian Americans have the lowest English proficiency rates. Half of our AAPI small businesses reported revenue losses of 75% or more during the pandemic. And so our mission has been quite clear, that we have to drive a powerful transformation that rebuilds lives, promotes equity, and confronts the many economic, health, and climate threats that we have long faced. And that mission has meant nurturing what we inherited from the people who built and shaped the city that we love and that we call home. That's 400 years worth of innovation, of energy, of struggle, and vision from generations of immigrants, dreamers, and doers. Now, this reminds me of another form of inheritance that I wanted to share with all of you, and that's what I inherited from my own parents. So from Elsa and from Manny, I inherited half of each of their genes, but all of their beautiful history. And that I'm here today with all of you, and as Chris mentioned, one of the first two Asian American deputy mayors that this city has appointed in its entire history, I think is a testament not only to the promise that this great city represents, but also the power of an inheritance that is more valuable than money. You see, my parents immigrated to this country a year before I was born, and in many ways our story follows the classic beats of the American immigrant story. They worked, when they immigrated here, multiple jobs. They still struggled to make ends meet. We relied on a Section 8 voucher and on food stamps all throughout my childhood. And I left for the East Coast, the first in my family to go to a U.S. college, having never seen snow, having never been to the East Coast, with $200 in my pocket. That was all of the money that my parents had. They cleared out their entire bank accounts, and I set off on my journey. Now, that inheritance may have been modest in financial value, but what my parents taught me about hard work and honoring those who came before me, I think is immeasurable. Indeed, as a city of immigrants, we all carry the echoes of the choices that led our families to leave their homes and strike out for better futures. My ancestors, like many of yours, were strivers and survivors, generation after generation. And I'm here with all of you because of their strength and resilience. And this brings me to the last type of inheritance that I wanted to talk about today. And that is really this particular question. What will future generations of AAPI people in this city inherit from all of us? Those of us in this room, those of us who are part of the AAPI community, and our allies. After all, from our inheritance, we choose what to cherish, what to disavow, and what to do next. And make no mistake, what we do next matters urgently, because it will spell the difference between whether we crawl out of the pandemic or if we, like generations of New Yorkers before us through times of crisis in our city, take a great leap forward. It will spell the difference between whether AAPIs merely recover from the pandemic or thrive in its wake. Now, I believe, and partly it's because I'm a little bit of a chronic optimist, that we can take that great leap forward, but this will require both individual and systemic actions. As individuals, I do believe that we all have the sacred duty to support our AAPI brothers and sisters. Please bring talented, dynamic, smart AAPIs into your orbit. People who are willing to solve problems and cut through all of the noise to get the job done. Cultivate the strengths of AAPIs around you. Give them opportunities to lead and grow and make mistakes and defy expectations. Seize every opportunity for mentorship, for sponsorship, for allyship. But the change must also be systemic, because ultimately, the extent to which AAPIs will thrive in a very complicated and changing world will depend on the choices made by policymakers, by business leaders like the ones in this room. I think it will depend on whether and how we do things like shifting the narrative and making AAPIs visible, building a strong analytical foundation for how different policy domains affect AAPIs, how we diversify the experts who drive the public discussion, how we ensure not just the quantity, not just the speed, but the velocity of those discussions, and most importantly, how we identify and advance policy priorities that close the very clear gap between awareness and action around these issues. But looking out into the audience, I see leaders across sectors, including the corporate and philanthropic and cultural sectors. So as you discuss ways to support the development of AAPI professionals and the advancement of issues critical to the larger AAPI community, whether it's during today's symposium or in all of your work going forward, what I invite you to do is to do this work with compassion. And I remind you that it's been said that there are really 3 forms of compassion. The first form, the simplest form, is that of kindness. The second form of compassion is giving of your abundance. And the third form, which is the hardest, that form of compassion is giving of your scarcity. And so whatever that might be for you, whatever might be scarce for you, and for so many of us, it's not actually money, it's time. I invite you to give that. Because if you do this, if we all do this, I'm convinced that we will leave something truly powerful to those who come after us. And make no mistake, your participation today proves that while the challenges facing AAPI communities are often intersectional, we do have the capacity to use the full force of all of our sectors to combat them. And it also proves that while anti-Asian hate has had a long and painful history in this country, we do have the capacity, working together, to take a stand against discrimination and violence in all of its forms, to utilize every platform and every tool that we have at our disposal, and to ensure that future generations of AAPIs, indeed of all New Yorkers, will truly inherit a safer and more inclusive city. So thank you for inviting me today, for listening, and I hope the rest of the symposium is productive and inspiring. Thank you.